What are we
Yeah.
talking about today? What's the topic, though, for the discussion?
Well, I wanted to talk to you about
Just so I remember.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I sent you a like a long-ish article that I put together on power a while ago
I remember that. Okay.
and about like consistent results and manifesting small things.
Oh, good. Oh, yes. Excellent. Yeah.
And then your
Brian, how
response,
polite are we supposed to be?
I think you
zero.
should, for us, it's zero. You have,
Okay.
we pride ourselves in, basically doing a Rogan-ish podcast, where we don't have to be polite to anybody. So, um,
Brutal honesty is always appreciated.
brutal honesty is the key.
Sounds good.
No holds barred in our place. That's right.
Um, yeah, and your response to me was very insightful because one of the things that you brought up was the issue of self-trust or trust in self, and also about um, how people that tend to get into this work have a negative view of power as well. And then you also mentioned the importance of like devotional work within the context of developing self-trust. So I thought that that would be a good topic for us to explore a little more
Okay.
deeply. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool.
But I think this goes into the nature of, we were talking about power. What is it? How do you get it? How do you use it? And our folks came into this notion of spiritual development in a framework that is fundamentally reflective of mid 20th century America. So what their emphasis is on is going to be somewhat different. In fact, what it is it's kind of mostly what you saw then was kind of a uh, wealthy man's shamanism. And what I mean very specifically by that is when we look at most magical practices in most societies, they're concerned about power in the sense of acquiring something or keeping something away. So I want good crops, I want good cattle, we want disease away, we want keep the evil eye away. You know what I'm saying? There's this very practical, mundane
Sure,
things that's focused.
sure.
And if you look at the New Age movement, even if we go back to the 60s and look at the early counterculture movement and the magical movements that are coming out of that, a lot of that is really focused on a kind of acquisition.
Right,
Not what can I become, how can I become more, but how can I have more? It's not quite counter-initiatic, but it's not really initiatic either.
right.
It's kind of an extension. How can I get more stuff? And the notion is interesting because when it's in that cultural context of I acquire because I can, if I have the money, the power, I buy what I want. But in the, we'll say, the non-technological society of shamanism and magical practices, you need a psychic dimension of power, and you need a psychic dimension of, we'll say, friends or associates. We'll call them allies, for lack of a better term. But you need to work with others to get your thing. We see that disconnect going on where here there was no need to work with others. It's kind of like that famous line from that terrible uh, movie, The Secret. The universe is your catalog, and you can just order what you want,
Right.
as if everything's just designed to have Amazon drop something off at your doorstep. There's no relationship to anyone or anything else involved. And I think that's where the whole notion of, power in a lot of these systems begins to break down because that's not how reality works. Reality is a series of relationships,
Can you
cultivated ones.
expand on the opposite of that? Like, what did we see in let's say, a healthy relationship based, sort of format?
Well, I think a healthy system is easy to see. If you were to go to, and here's something most of the audience will be familiar with, or at least vaguely familiar with because they can see it. You go to any of the Indian, Tibetan, or Chinese systems, right? So what do? You don't come empty-handed. Think of it like a party. You and everyone remembers that guy, that person in college who always showed up empty-handed to every party. Never had enough cash left over after the bill was served. We all know that person. You don't want to be that guy on the metaphysical realm.
Right.
So when you look at those systems, and this goes back to how the culture influences the system, those systems are fundamentally an enactment of a court system, a royal court system on some level. So when you make offerings to the deities, even though they don't need them, the idea is that you're putting out all these things that are what you would put out for an important guest. You're thinking of the other. What is the role of the other in this?
Right.
Because I'm going to be asking for a gift. Now, if you're not dealing with certain deities, but you're dealing with other types, then they do require the gift, and they can be very easily offended if it's not the right one. And that's another story, and that depends on the system you work with. But when we look at the metaphysical systems that arise in the mid 20th century United States, and then by extension in Europe, and we see them focusing on the idea of acquisition, there's no real consideration that there's anyone else in the universe but me. Yeah, there may be other people, but they can get their stuff too. All they have to do is do the same thing I do, and they can have the universe act like a catalog, like Amazon delivery, and give them what they want to. Which may or may not be true, because what that doesn't involve is an understanding of the nature of interconnectedness beyond my current existence, or what we'll call karma.
Mm-hmm.
There's no sense of a pre-existing karma. There's no existing of a continuity beyond cradle to grave.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if I'm here and I'm a blank slate, that's fine. But what if I'm not? What have I brought with me? And even if I have, what are the different, we'll say karmas, habituated patterns that I've developed over this lifetime? And how do they get in my way? And this is what, Dustin and I were exchanging emails about, is how does one's own inner self-perception then create a filter for achieving any of the goals we want? Any of them. Doesn't matter. I mean,
Right.
we know anyone who knows him, they can see it in the background. He's a master artist. And to do that required a tremendous amount of effort and work. There may have been a certain amount of latent talent there that could be brought forth. But without effort, it would never have been brought forth. And then without the capacity to follow the directions given, it would not have been brought forth. So all of these things line up, all of them which are good things that he has to bring forth. But then there's maybe some things we don't know about. What created his inclination towards art? And sometimes it'll be, oh, I've always just had an interest. Okay, fine, but that's not really it. That's an answer, but it's not really an insight.
Right.
And it's the same thing with all of this. We don't know where a lot of our ideas and interests come from either, which is the other part, because if we live in a sea of spirits, we'll call it spirits or sentient beings, who knows what's whispered in our ears? And that's the scary part for so many people, because they like to think all of their thoughts are their own.
Right.
And then when you do develop these relationships with, say, sentient beings or visible beings, just as you do with people, just as you do with ourselves here, we communicate back and forth to one another. We exchange ideas that sometimes take root and sometimes don't. So there's a whole host of interconnections happening that create or influence our self-concept. So that's why we're told to learn to understand ourselves, discipline our minds, understand our own self-conceptualization, because from that, then we're more or less in charge, for better or worse, of those choices we make. We're not victims of circumstance or randomness at that point. Now, it doesn't mean we control everything, because
Right.
that's another mistake. We can control how we respond to situations, but it doesn't mean we can control the situation. And
Don't you
that's,
think that, in some ways, what we generalize as doing the work, doing your meditations, doing your clearing, doing all of these things, and the self um, recognition and our faults and our weaknesses and our strengths, all of that. One of the things that's the byproduct of that is that we become more sensitive to those whispers and perhaps but with our in in a way that isn't a cacophony again, but at the same time, it's like we can actually, we actually observe them and say, oh, I'm going to follow up on this one, even though I don't know where that thought came from, or, at least add a little energy to it and try and do something with it to see if it pans out or doesn't, or if it was just a random thought that was, some kind of pipe dream or whatever. Um, but I feel like doing the work and doing, the systematic training of ourselves um, makes us more amenable to that, let's say, a more detailed observation of those whispers, if we will.
yeah, well, that's the point. It's a systematic observation of ourselves. And when you talk about a cacophony, I mean, those who maybe are new to this or not really familiar with it, there's certain practices you do. They're pretty standard. They're not unique to really many systems, but when you start to hear things for the first time, it is like being in a noisy room. You do hear a great many sounds and noises and voices, and if you don't have someone there to tell you, that's pretty normal. It's really, it's going to get you a schizophrenia diagnosis.
Right.
And part of it too then is learning how to focus in on those noises by filtering others out. And then how do you hear the sounds? And then how do you know which sounds to trust? So it does become somewhat complex in that regard. Generally, most people don't have a lot of problems. I mean, we're always familiar with the ones that do, but most people don't. But that's still, it's not to rule it out, because in that listening, what you have to develop is the unwavering self-confidence, as some would call it. Now, that self-confidence is the whole basis of everything that we do on this path. And here the issue is, well, if I knew what to trust, I'd be doing it already. So you have to be willing to take certain risks. And how do we identify a true intuitive impulse? And people misuse the word intuition all the time. I
Sure.
mean a genuine one, a genuine, reliable, unmistakably beneficial and correct impulse or suggestion or piece of advice from our deepest part of our mind to ourselves that we realize and can act upon. How do we recognize that from a brain fart or just a raw emotion or an impulse or a habit?
Or something else like pulling us in a direction that may not be beneficial for us, or a distraction or a waste of time.
Yeah. How do you do that? That's a question we get all the time.
And what answer do you give?
A lot of it is just experience. You have to pay attention to the qualitative differences, which are very subtle. Like if it's a strong, overwhelming impulse and it has too much of an emotional quality to it, then it's probably not something to listen to. Yet at the same time, you'll notice certain times in your life when you had really powerful insights, there was a calmness to it. There was a subtleness to it. There's a calmness, but it was very clear and crisp and very bright. It was,
Almost a feeling of resolve when it
yeah,
happens. Yeah.
yeah, resolve. That's a good word. Yeah, no question. Now you may question it at the time because you're not used to it, and that's the other thing.
Sure.
We're not used to the experience, but that's where practice comes in, where we have to learn to listen.
And it might be a good segue where, like where we were talking with Dustin earlier about um, how would we, how would we use, like, let's say, a devotional practice on and off to help us with that discernment, you know?
Devotion is a tricky one. It gets kind of a bad rap in modern circles for a variety of reasons, but it is the aspect of ourselves which is, deeply emotional, which really is a connection to something. And without that connection, it's impossible to make any progress. So, you are devoted to painting, not just art, but painting. You are devoted to a particular style of painting. And that requires a focus, a conviction, because it's this or that, not both. I can do this or I can do that. There's only 24 hours in the day, 7 days in the week, only so much time. So when you make your devotion, your conviction in a particular direction, it's, often described in these heavily romantic terms because it's to the exclusion of all else or exclusion of other possibilities. We often don't think of that in these terms. We're often told that we can do anything we want, we can be anything we want. It's never too late. And this is fundamentally not true in the limited sense. You have only so much time, and you have to, and the choices you make go with you. So when we make that conviction, it's a very emotional, and yet with that emotion, it carries all of our energies. It's not just a raw emotion, it's the fuel of all of the physical and intellectual, and by intellect, I mean reasoning capacity, self-correctability. It's like you were a chemistry major, right, Brian? So, you have to have a certain amount of emotional engagement with this. Otherwise, it's just too boring and difficult.
It's true.
Otherwise it's not. Yet at the same time, you have to constantly use your reasoning capacity. Same thing with Dustin. Dustin's not just slopping paint on a page. There's a constant analytical process going on there on method. And it may be happening below the threshold of awareness because it's so well trained, but it's there for self-correction. So we're bringing into balance these qualities, of action. We'll say physical. We'll say the emotional conviction, the analytical part. We're bringing all of this into a nice whole. And now what makes that metaphysical is when we bring in the other aspect, which we'll call a kind of super consciousness, for lack of a better term. How about this? A metaphysical component. Because even if you don't know it, you trust it. You trust that the metaphysical component is there. And if you don't have that metaphysical component, if you don't trust that it's there, no matter what you do, it's still more or less limited to the realm of duality, of materiality or duality at best.
You mean your actions and your choices and
Right.
how you apply your reasoning faculty
Correct.
to what you invest your time in is limited to your physical person, basically, and like your ability to discern what is the right next step for you. There's like a deep sense of limitation to that without the metaphysical component, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's why when we talked about, I think one of the things we talked about in that one email was, this notion of duality and stuff like that. And, duality isn't always the issue. Duality is a perception. Do we bring, there's limit and unlimit, there's time and eternity, there's whatever you want to think, samsara, nirvana, all this kind of different terms, but really they're all within the same universal framework. They're not separate. They're not separate dimensions. And when we look at things, we can tell the differences. Are we acting now with this notion of that there's a metaphysical component here? And we can say that in several different ways. One would be, is there an energy when we're talking about power? So we talk about the power of the days, the energies of the days, the planetary energies. We talk about the doctrines, the correspondences, all of that. And you could compose a painting if you wanted to using all these great metaphysical ideologies and doctrines. And it'd probably be wonderful. I'm sure it'd be spectacular. Or you can open up to the energy of the day. What is the emotional and inspirational influence of the moment? And that's a form of natural magic. Okay. And you're trying to paint a wonderful picture, probably superior to the previous suggestion, by the way, but you'd probably just be spectacular because it's more direct. It's more innate, the inspiration. And that's with any of us, no matter what we do. But then if you were to do that inspiration, but without a sense of connection, that's when you see maybe, and I'll just stay with this, like the troubled lives of artists. I mean, they're just spectacular, but their lives are a disaster because it's all about them and their creation. And that's going to not last long as much as we'd like it to. And it can be anything, writers, scientists, anything, pick it. You throw all this energy into your life, and then there's a realization that, wait a minute, when I'm gone, this is probably going to disappear. And that's where we talk about getting into this notion of not only the transcendental realities and continuity, but also the notion within the spiritual ideas of tradition. What is the past, present, and future of teachings, which consist of philosophy, theory, and practice, and then fruit of practice, result. How are you integrating yourself into that or learning from that, but then also continuing it too? Just as people don't want to have a relationship with these spiritual powers or forces, they just want to get something that they want. It's the same way with teachings today. I just want to come and get what I want a la carte, and I don't really want to be responsible to anyone or anything else. And I just can't imagine, if you went into the classical painting studios, right, of the Renaissance, right? And and you finally get accepted, right? And it could be any of them. It could be like the master sculptors, like the masons in building cathedrals, right? You just didn't get to do what you wanted to do. There was a whole relationship. There was a continuity. There was something that was from the past that was in the present and moving forward. Even if it changed, there was still something. There was the idea that there was a relationship, not just the acquisition or purchase.
Well, that's kind of like the idea of, I mean, even in the trades, right? Apprenticeship, you know, where people, lots of people apply for apprenticeships, but only a few are selected. And, you know, and I would say I know a few of them. And, and I think tradespeople are like, they're some of the best people that I know, because especially the masters at their craft, right? Because they're still in that no nonsense. They don't have time for nonsense. And so if some, apprentice, that's accepted starts to go off on his own, or, wants to change how things are done or whatever it is on his fanciful notion, they just get rid of them. They go to the next person, because it's like they don't have time for that. They don't have time for that type of just I just show me what you know, so I can go out and do my own thing. And without any context, without any kind of hierarchy of learning. And they want to know, they want to know the bright and shiny thing up here, when they don't know the 10 steps it takes to get to that point. So
Dustin, were you there with Brian years ago when I did the presentation, that class on folk magic?
Yeah.
unfolding the rose.
Yeah, no, no, not the unfolding the rose. It
Oh,
was a
the other
different.
one.
It
Yeah,
was the
yeah,
one
yeah.
up here. You came up here for it,
Yep.
and you gave a bit of a presentation
Yep.
on Woodrow. Okay,
Oh,
I remember when I gave the presentation, the section on making red strings, protection cords. And I said to them, I said, now, don't do this for a few times before you run out and start trying to sell them for $10 a piece. And do you believe? I think there are a couple of people that like within the week they had them on. They were having their protection cords out at $10 a piece.
Yeah.
I think this is where we have to make the difference between, we don't have a lot of practitioners. And I use the word student in a very specific term. We don't really have students either. We have mostly consumers. But what we'll say is students. A student is someone, we'll give them benefit of the doubt, and even in the consumption, that they're learning something. They come, they learn something, they kind of maybe not a lot, but they're whatever, they're trying at the buffet of ideas. But in order to make progress, you need to be a practitioner. You need to take those studies and apply them in the manner you've been given. And that makes you a practitioner of something. And then the more you practice it, the more you internalize it, the more you're able to understand it. And then that puts you in the capacity to possibly instruct others at some point, to be a teacher. And within contemporary spirituality, because of the emphasis on, as we said, on acquisition, that notion of devotion, of connection, which means a secondary role. I take a secondary place here. That's not present. And that notion of how do you get out of your own way long enough to learn something? It's, how much do I need to pay you for you to give that to me? And really, you want that much for it? Is that too, yeah. And I just want to tell them, well, I have an idea. Go get a plane to wherever and come back in a month and let me know how much that cost you. So we have to look at how we create students to become practitioners, telling them that you're part of a chain of ideas here, maybe not a formal initiatic chain, but a chain of ideas. How are you going to be teaching this in the future? Like Dustin, if you were to take your students and say, I'm going to teach you how to paint, and I want to look to some of you, how are you going to be teaching this in the future? Most of them probably don't even think, what do you mean? Teach? Why would I do that?
Well, yeah, because I think at least any of the people that I've taught, I think they have a sense of like they feel maybe so inadequate in their own skill that they're primarily focused on just acquiring the ability to create what they want, let alone like teaching others how to create what they want is just out of the question. That's not even on the horizon yet. So like, and I feel like it's the same thing with us, because like when it comes to the idea of like power, right, or like what draws most people into this work to begin with is I want to have more of an influence on my personal reality than I do right now, which is to say the capacity to create more of what I prefer and less of what I don't prefer, right? And but I feel like, and I think that I'm just guessing if people feel like I do in any way, they have some degree of a sense of like impotence or powerlessness to assert their power, or their growing power on at least one particular or problematic area of their life that doesn't seem to change or they can't seem to do anything about. So like, so and that you know brings up for me it highlights like many things, but like one of them being the principle that Brian refers to frequently, that the external is a perfect mirror of the internal. um, and we consider the idea that our life is a reflection of ourselves, or a reflection of our consciousness. But that kind of brings us to the main kind of point of the article that I sent you, which is like not necessarily a mind matter duality, but the question of like, where do I put the lion's share of my energy and my attention to initiate the causes that will produce the effects or the outcomes that I want. So should I like, does the mind do have any influence on my reality, or is it only my physical actions, correct or incorrect, that are going to produce the outcomes that I want, right? um and I think that like anybody who's involved in any of this work, they entertain the idea that my mind has an impact on my life or my reality. And I think you're right, like it is with a strong, maybe it's because of our culture that we're raised in, but it is with a strong emphasis on like the attitude of acquisition, because or you could say like, you know uh pain elimination, or like suffering the reduction of my suffering and the increase of my personal fulfillment or happiness in life or whatever, joy, fulfillment. And so you know, yeah, I don't, I'm not sure what the bridge is there from, like what I'm
I,
talking
th
about
I
to.
think you have to look at then the question is because one of the problems that is what you've clearly described is when you have this view, you're clearly stuck in duality. Pain avoidance, happiness increase. There's nothing wrong with wanting to avoid pain, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to be happy. The problem is that becomes the motivation. The motivation isn't how can I become a fully functioning human being? What does it mean to be a fully functioning human being? What does that mean within the context of spiritual traditions and practices? And that means pretty much stop worrying about so much of yourself. Stop being so self-absorbed. Because, what you're doing most of the time is you're just making your troubles worse. You just stew on them and stew on them. And they're really often not that bad. And in fact, what I find is most of the people we deal with are just cheap, selfish bastards. I mean, really. They've got the time, I mean, realistically, and the resources and the technology to access this stuff. But they're so petty and infantile in their obsession, their self-obsession.
So do
You
you,
ask them, no, you ask them to go out of their way for something, and they won't do it. You ask them to do something that will really help them overcome their pettiness, and they won't do it. They argue over the price of enlightenment. And I don't just mean the financial price, I mean the genuine, honest, real price of enlightenment. They argue over it. They're selfish. It's only about me and what I want. The relationships are devolved into a transactional kind of situation. It's not about other people. It's not about any of the beings in the world around them. It's just what do I want and how do I get what I want? How do I stay happy and how do I avoid suffering? And then, of course, they're bastards because they're illegitimate. They want no association with anyone else and they don't want to be responsible to anyone else. And they don't want to be part of a tradition and they want to pretend that they're great solo practitioners going on their own, doing it their own way. When they forget that the only reason they can do anything is because of all these other people who've done it before them, whether it's because they can read the book or watch the video. So when we look at this, we've got to be really serious about when you want to solve your problems, then you have to stop being you. And you have to stop being you long enough to get out of your own way. And that can be in anything. That's whether we're learning how to hold a paintbrush properly, learning how to do a martial art, learning how to drive a car, learning how to understand what's going on deep inside our heads. And that means someone's going to grab you by the scruff of the neck and shake you and say, this is it right here. This is what you need to stop doing. This is it right here. This is what you now need to do. Now, after you've stopped doing this, eating a Big Mac every day, and when you've started doing this, going to the gym every other day for an hour, then we can move on to this and talk about transformation. And that's what we're talking about here is people want to transform themselves without stopping their bad habits or adopting any new good ones.
right? I mean, that definitely is like, I thought you clearly articulated that in the introduction to your book, The Inner Way, which is one of my favorites. And I was rereading the introduction to it where you talk about how to acquire occult power this morning before our conversation. Um, and you clearly articulated that. You said, that is after all why so many seek occult power. They want to cheat nature to obtain what they are unwilling to work for in some other manner, right? And I thought that was like, I mean, obviously it's correct, um, um, but the other, I just want to cite a couple other things from here because I thought they might contribute to the conversation. But one of the things that you also said in here is that you said confidence must hold in both the technique and the means of transmission. Jesus stated that whatever we have faith in will come to pass. Agrippa wrote that confidence or faith in one's abilities was the key to all successful magical operations. Failure was always from a lack of faith, not poor technique. And you also stated that one of the reasons why, or one of the most common reasons why people leave their path is because they don't have representations or living examples. There must be complete and utter confidence in the methods being employed, their means of transmission or acquisition by the student, and the living teacher who conveys them. Partial confidence in the teacher will undermine confidence in the technique. Lack of a teacher requires that one have confidence in the author of the book or audio tape or other means of transmission. Lack of a living example of the efficacy of the practical and more abstract esoteric methods of spiritual study is the major reason many students drop away from their studies in the various traditions of Western esotericism. And so I feel like, I mean, I would say the two of you are probably the best examples I have of teachers or living representations of this tradition that I'm aware of. Like Mark, one of the things I wanted to say to you, I don't want to get off topic, but just like, I really like this quote from Elon Musk, love him or hate him. He said something which I think is very accurate, which is like people just assume that technology gets better by itself, right? And that it's just this kind of constantly moving upswinging curve that just we're all just riding on this wave of like, oh, that's just what technology does. It just gets better. And the point he was making was that like actually its default is to devolve and to fall apart all the time. It only gets better if people who are very smart work very hard to make it better. And that's the only reason why it's moving forward. And I was also reading like an interview that you did with John Dubuis this morning, and it called to my attention the fact that like there was a time when all of these techniques and traditions and ideas were like less clear and more scarce than they are now, and it's only because people like yourself took the time to devote their lives to like organizing the information, passing on what they found to be most useful, and doing that in like a really clear and digestible form, which I feel like, Mark, you really have done in like a number of your books that I've read, and I really appreciate that. But like, I know that's kind of like a waxing on of like many different points. So I'm sorry that maybe that even, all those thoughts might seem a little disorganized, but because it's like a big package of ideas, but like, but it does come back to the core idea of like power in my mind, because I guess the core question for me is like, for you guys as like representations of this tradition, living representations of this tradition, both of you have devoted an enormous amount of your life to like exploring these techniques and these practices, especially within the context of the Western esoteric tradition. It's kind of like not just like what have you found to be most valuable, but also like what have you found in your experience to be the parameters we should have or the expectations we should have about the acquisition of power and the application of power in our lives. Like, what is it that's possible to do? How far does our influence extend? Because even like, I understand when you're talking about like selflessness and like the idea of like, I should not be so focused on myself. I should be focused on like others, or those will come after me, or the well-being of others and not just my own well-being. The only problem with that is like, if I don't have a clear understanding of like what is good for me and how to consistently create what's good for me, how could I have any presumption that I would know what's good for others and how to manifest that for them, right?
Well, that's a good question, and the answer is pretty simple. You have to learn to trust yourself, and you have to use intelligence. And intelligence is one of those forces that is dramatically underrated, if not outright dismissed in contemporary spiritual circles. You don't see it in traditional yogas. I think from the stuff Brian sent me, you certainly don't see it in Taoism. You don't see it in alchemy or Kabbalah. But for some reason, this notion of the intellect is somehow inferior and is not to be trusted. Well, the reality is the intellect is to be developed because that's the gatekeeper. That's the gateway to these inner dimensions. We have to learn discrimination. We have to learn that life is nothing more than an if-then statement. If I do this, then this happens. So that's karma, if-then. So we look at our actions and we say, what are the goals I want? What are the objectives? What are the actions I'm taking? Has anyone else done them before? What seems like a reasonable outcome, reasonable effort, and you simply undertake it. We overcomplicate the matter. And part of that overcomplication is by, and this is where the doubts come in too, is you want everything. You want too much. So there's so many desires coming through you that you can't channel them, you can't organize them. So you know that you need a job, you need money, you have to have a place to live, you have to have food, you need these things. So, organize from the bottom up. What is it that I have to absolutely have? And how do I do that? And how do I get that? And then people say, oh, I've got a dead end job. Well, we've all had dead end jobs. I don't know anyone who hasn't had one. But you often take them simply because of the opportunity. See, this is where the confidence arises. The confidence arises that this is going to be a mechanism to something else. That something else is short term. It pays the bills that I need to pay right now. And it's long term. Oh, it pays the bills that I need to pay right now so I can focus what little energy is left on the next phase. It's just accepting certain aspects of reality as they are so that you can manage them then. If you accept your life as it is, then you can begin to shape it and manage it. But if you pretend it's something other, then you're just adding fantasy to the delusion. And that other would be, for example, I'm not going to get what I want, or I don't have what I want, so I'm not going to do anything. Or it's someone else's problem or responsibility that I don't have one. And it could be, all those things could be true. It doesn't change the fact that you still need to act in a direction and then course correct as you go. And no, but how do you do that? Well, if you have a clear image of where you want to be, a clear image of the goal you want for yourself as you're going through this, things will begin to shape around it. But what happens is we don't have a clear image of what we want for ourselves. And when things don't shape around the vague image that we have, we get upset and we give up. You may or may not have a clear image of the finished painting at the end when you start. I may or may not have a clear image of the book at the end, but I have a clear sense of the book completed. I have a clear sense of the project completed. And the obstacles that come up aren't just writing or research, they're life stuff. Everyone has life stuff that comes up. That's the other part. The lie is that your problems are supposed to go away because you don't want them anymore. The reality is you have to bring your karma to fruition.
What does that mean to you?
Well, that's what it means to me. It's what it means. It's the habituated patterns of who knows, countless eons of lifetimes is going to come to fruition so that you can deal with it. Address your habituated patterns so they're no longer patterns, that you can act consciously and freely. But that doesn't happen unless it's standing in front of you. So when you do this stuff, often your life is going to go to crap.
Okay, and I think, but that's I think I feel like that's the main point. Like that's and not the main point. It's one of the main points, right? Is that like, okay, people want to do this stuff to make their life better, right? And sometimes it could be in regard to like a health or relationship thing, right? Or maybe a spiritual thing, let's say. But oftentimes it's a physical thing, a physical, like you said, that's more directly related to their survival, like money, shelter, food, whatever, the quality of their job or their income or whatever, right? And they're like, I want power because I want to make this thing better, right? And then we're entertaining the idea that my mind or my inner self has some is in part or in total responsible for the reflection that I have in my life right now, or the quality of those circumstances, which are causing suffering or displeasing to me or not what I want, right? And so, okay, so Mark Stavish or Brian Osborne or Dustin Neese, somebody tells me, hey, you should do the middle pillar every day, and or you should do this devotional practice, or you should start doing burning meditation, or you should start doing any number of practices that will, help you to get to the root of this problem as it exists on an internal level so that you can more consciously change it. And exactly what you described happens. I start doing those practices and things get worse. So it's like, so as living examples of the tradition, I feel like if that's the case, it's our responsibility to like articulate that pattern and explain why that's happening, because otherwise you are going to give up on the practice, or you're not
But it
going
is
to carry it through
articulated.
thank you.
I mean, it is articulated. It's not new.
What do you mean?
The problem is when the most of the sources of information out there aren't very good.
Right.
So what you end up with is people people reading a few books, doing this for a few years, and then deciding they're going to write a book. I mean, I was doing this for 25 years, I think, before I published a book.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so so this is the point. Where are the teacher, the teachings, and the community of practitioners? Where do they come from and who are they? Just because, as I said many times, just because a book is in print doesn't mean should trust it, because publishers never ask you, does this stuff works? They don't ask you that. They just ask how many copies you can sell. And this goes back then to people getting what they deserve because they get what they want. I want something that's going to help me fix my life. Well, here's one of the points. A lot of people get very good results in the beginning. We call that beginner's luck because they go in, they don't have a lot of ideas as to how things should happen, so they get lucky. Okay, that's good. Gets them going. A lot of people come in and they have some minor desires. Minor meaning it's relatively small and short term. Money, relationship, car, fill in the blank. Okay. And they will have results with that because they really need it. There's a strong emotional engagement internally, and what they want is not that unrealistic or outside their grasp. It's very short term. Even if it's a relationship that lasts the course of their lifetime, that's still short term in the cosmic sense. It's limited to this physical life. When you see people trying to make bigger changes in their fundamental life structure, bigger changes in their what Leshevsky called their subconscious synthesis or their subjective synthesis, that's when the big things happen. Because it's like going into a building and saying, we're going to lift this building off the foundation and then we're going to expand the foundation. Okay. So many things will work on a small level, But when you try to affect more and more aspects of your habituated patterns and tendencies or karma, or you try to affect the habituated patterns and tendencies and unconscious habits and patterns or karma of those around you or the community or the world, there's more resistance.
Mm.
I mean, it's simple. This isn't rocket science. Don't eat a Big Mac every day.
Well, I mean, that's simple enough, but I feel
It's
like,
not.
but
It's not because I'm saying
right.
seriously, it's not because we tell people what not to do and they habitually don't want to not do it. And then you then come back to that and then the victimization pattern sets in. So this is where a teacher is important because they can grab you by the scruff of the neck and really hold you to say, listen, this is the relationship we set up. Now, do you want to keep that or not? Because if you do, this is what you need to pay attention to right here, what you're doing right here.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess what isn't simple, but I feel like you articulated very well, is that idea of why it's more difficult to change larger things. And also, elucidating a clear idea of karma, right? And what that means. And also like its relationship to, like you said earlier in our conversation, as like one of the ultimate goals, let's say, I hope I'm restating this correctly, is that like is uh, to be able to act freely and spontaneously or clearly, um, and not be like dominated by your karma, which is your memory or the instilled patterns of how you've been or how you've created yourself to be up to this point, right? So, um, you know,
I think to look at it this way, and that's thank you very much, because that's correct. That's an accurate understanding of what I said. Look at it this way. I come to you and I say to you, hey, Dustin, I like you to, and this is the way people approach the universe, okay, with their catalog desire. Okay. We know each other. We know each other. I'll say, Dustin, I'd like you to introduce me to your teacher, your art instructors. Well, why? Well, I'd like him to paint a painting for me. Okay. You know, he's expensive. Yeah, but I'm your friend. You'll get him to do it for me for free, right? Now take this instead. Now it's not just me, someone who knows you, but it's a stranger. Stranger sends you an email, I got these problems. Help me out. It's like this inability to understand relationship. And karma at the bottom end of the day is about relationships. How do things relate to one another? How do my actions and what are their effects? And then emotions mostly are about inter inter intrapersonal relationship. How do I perceive myself, my self-concept? And we do assumption of the God form and deific representations and acting as if to overcome those limits. Okay. And it's interpersonal. How do I treat you as a human being? How do I give you um, consideration is the legal term. Do I give you consideration? So if we want to overcome our problems, we have to start giving greater consideration, not just to those around us, but who those around us are. It's not just those around us who are the physical dimension and our family and friends, which we have to, but what are those around us which are in the psychic dimension, the metaphysical dimension? What we call angels or archangels or deities or whatever. It's it's like people pretend that those things don't have an agenda. It's
how do you know that they do?
because they have a function and a purpose.
How do you know that they do?
Because we categorize them as such. And then when you interact with them on some level, and trust me, we'll use the word some because it's nowhere near. what they're capable of. It's just like you or your teacher will say, if I were to get, we'll call you the angel, we'll call him the archangel. You know, like if I were to interact with you, I only interact with you really on this kind of narrow level of art. I don't know anything else about you, just that. And with him, I can interact with him just on that narrow nature that you're part of the many people that he has created or supervises or instructed that can create these magnificent pieces of art. But I have no idea what else is going on back there, what their whole purpose is. The purpose of all that art may be have a cultural or cosmic influence, down the road, that
Mhm.
I know nothing about.
Humility.
Yeah. But also meaning that the world doesn't revolve around me.
Right.
And this is part of that humility and that devotion is when you still appreciate and love yourself. You just start, it's not that you think less of yourself, you just stop thinking so much about yourself.
Well, it's that idea when we come back to that again, like, it's funny that you brought that up. My grandfather would have said one of the most famous sayings, which he said it to me first, and then a roadman that I worked with many years ago said the same thing to me, and I was like, wow, that's not coincidence. And he'd say one of their best saying or one of their favorite sayings is, "White man comes with empty hands." you know? And it's like, yeah, so I mean, that was seeded in my brain as a child. I mean, a small child. And it was like, but but we see it represented in like, going to some place, bringing a dish to share, or, whatever the appropriate thing is at the time for whatever the situation is, right? But it was always, I feel like, all of the indigenous cultures that I've been involved with over the years, that's so deeply seated from such a young age. They can't imagine not doing that, not offering something first in order to establish just the pinprick of the start of a relationship, right?
And it's funny. I think we talked about this one, didn't we, Brian? The joke is, and then the other one is, they may not come with empty hands, but they're filled with the wrong stuff.
Right.
Like this one I remember reading it. It was hilarious. I think I sent you a photograph of the page. The Indian shaman says, listen, I don't need another blanket or pouch of tobacco. Put some gas in my tank for the winter. Put some liquid fuel in there.
Yep.
And that's the other part too, is you have to not just make a token offering.
Right.
And we see a tremendous amount, at least I have now. I got to tell you, this is a recent phenomena. When I look at the people I knew growing up, and when I look at those experiences in those lodges and groups that I experienced younger, that was not the case. That was hardly the case. But there's this notion of, you have to learn to know what is expected of you, so that it's not just expected, you just know what to do in this environment. And
Right.
we talk about visualizing, and I want to go back to this. We talk about, and I can picture it in my mind. I can see the pages even of this notion that when you're going to approach deity or God or something of that nature, you take on this idea as if you could approach an all-powerful king. What would that be like? What's that feel? You can approach an all-powerful king. Oh, everything is possible. What's the one thing you would ask for? So, when you're going deep inside yourself and you're looking at this omniscience, omnipotent, and omnipresent power, you even have to have used your intelligence ahead of time, the intellect, which is part of you. That's an aspect of your function to clearly identify what it is you want and need. And if you keep going just for stuff in this world, which you don't need metaphysics for, by the way. That's part of the problem. It's if you have a metaphysical agency or background to the world, that's fine. That's good. That's helpful. But you don't need one to paint the picture. You don't need one to make the art. You don't need one to make the money. As we said earlier, you don't need one. It helps if you do. So if you have a metaphysical idea, but your whole focus is just on getting more in this world and not becoming more so that you can do more, so that you can give more, then you're, again, just either terribly misguided or just a cheap, selfish bastard.
Or you don't know.
That's what I say, you're misguided.
Yeah.
So it may be that's correct, at least that's correctable.
Right. Right.
So that's what we're trying to do is give you this sense of getting out of your own way. And then the power is going to flow more freely because it's like turning on a faucet. You know, when you were a kid, you turn the faucet on, you put your thumb over it just to see how far it would spray.
Hose and siblings. That's what
Hose and
comes to my
siblings.
mind.
I think the reason, I say this repeated is because it's really not that difficult. It's the question's overcomplicated. It's just I don't like that answer. It's like I'm on my fourth tarot card of the morning because I didn't like any of the other answers.
Um, well, I think the question, if somebody were to like accept all the things that you're saying, the question would be like, especially in regard to like a devotional practice, right? Because you're, I think part of what you're saying is that this like the solution to the problem of power as a tripping point in esoteric practice is like understanding the nature of the universe as being based on relationships, right? um and okay, so if I entertain that idea and I say, okay, like, well, how do I have a more involved or substantial relationship with something greater than myself, maybe a particular deity or whatever, and I'm willing to engage in some type of devotional work, um, like where do I even
That's simple.
start? And also like how do I discern like 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 because I think part of it for me is like, and this may be like just a generational thing, is that like I have a very uh like deep, it's not like a distrust, but like a lack of faith or belief in even the like reality or existence of something like Hermes. Like we say like, oh, like you should do this practice, devotional practice to like Hermes or Tote or whatever. And you're like, okay, well, like I have to presuppose that that even exists, that that's like an actual real thing that like, and like that is worth forming a relationship with and trying to like enact some type of like devotional relationship with, because it takes time, energy, attention, even if it's a small amount, even if I do like the bare minimum of like choosing to like direct my thought, um emotion, imagination, attention to, even for like 2 minutes in a day, that still takes the idea that like that's a real thing, and that like that is going to have some
Well,
positive influence on my
well,
life.
there's two answers to that, and both of them work. Okay. There's the what we'll call the theistic approach and the non-theistic approach. And in the theistic approach, you're conceptualizing that there are these archetypal forces that exist. Okay, and that's fine. So you're going to conceptualize that this archetypal force exists, that there is an aspect of it within you, and that you can understand this, grow this, and develop this relationship both internally and externally. So you may not even put any emphasis on the internal one. It may be like a relationship when you were a child, when you were a young teenager, and you were flirting with the notions of romance. And that, while you're the object of your desire, your objectification of your idealization of desire, whether it be the redhead in the third row in front of you or whatever it happened to be, elicits within you an inner response. An inner response that really may have nothing to do with them, may have nothing to do, it's all ideation, it's all fantasy, but it creates a cascading sense of feelings, emotions, and ideas that at some point awaken within you a greater sensitivity to the other. You're willing to do things you never thought were possible. You're willing to wash on a regular basis and iron your t-shirts just so that you can get the attention of a young woman. There isn't a single teenager I know that didn't finally straighten up their lives simply so they could get laid. And there's just that simple fundamental reality of how that affects our growth as a human being and relationships and that the otherness. Even if you never had a communication with her, maybe somehow you happen to be at the right place, right time, and not wearing a stained t-shirt, Brian, and you spoke to someone else. Coincidence brought you to the fruition of your objective, of your desire, of your heart's desire. Now, the other possibility is a non-theistic approach, where you're simply taking the understanding that this idea is just an idea. It is a representation of forces or energies within you that we just, for whatever reason, we anthropomorphize, we give a name, we give a title to, but that you're going to do this to come in contact with or awaken whatever greater potentiality you have, whatever that happens to be. You're not going to get caught up and concerned about the names. As you just recognize this is a pathway to greater potentiality coming forth. So we see in Israel Regardie's book, the 1-Year Manual or 12 Steps to Enlightenment, at the end of it, and of course at the Institute for Hermetic Studies, we did some extended commentaries on that text. And you can get that course if you like. At the final chapter, it talks about the warrior within, letting the warrior within take over. So what you do in the morning is when you get up in the morning, and this is one way to do it, there are others, but you visualize the deity of choice above your head about an arm's length, brilliant and bright. Or you simply a great sphere, a great brilliant point of light, a realization that there's a kind of a quality, something there looking out for you, even if it's just an expression of you, your own higher self, whatever you want to call it. And you visualize it settling inside your heart and powerful and radiant and radiates around you. It's not limited and small, but goes out a good maybe 30, 40 feet around you. It fills the place with brilliant light. And you say, everything I do today, I do for you. I give everything to you. Something to that effect. And then you invite these qualities and you conceptualize what they are, these qualities of insight, intelligence, creativity, warmth, compassion, service, whatever. Pick whatever they are. There's an infinite number in some ways. To work through you intermittently across the day. You take whatever you get. This is for you. Even though you're eating the food, you're giving that food to your God, your deity, your higher self. Because if you're dead, it doesn't function. It's got nothing to work through. So, you better feed it because if when you stop breathing, it stops functioning.
Hence, the body is a temple, right?
And the body's a temple. So you do that across the day. Now, see how long you can do that without having to be reminded because you've forgotten. And then you keep doing that day, 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 day. And then at night, when you go to bed, you imagine that sphere going back up above your head and kind of instructing you or awakening you as you go into the deep sleep. And that's all you need to do. You do that, that's enough. Because across the day, as you keep handing things over to it, this is for you. You don't even have to make the verbal statement if you can, but you don't have to, you know? And because what that does is that gets you out of your own narrow, limited sense of self. It gets rid of your greed and selfishness. This is me, this is mine, that's mine, this is mine. That's enough. There, that's your devotional practice. And that's pretty much what they all come down to in the end. They're just elaborations on those key points.
I want to offer one other thing that I remember this from years and years ago when we started, and I just always found this to be, it was a simple thing, it was a small thing, but it had a profound effect. We've talked about this with the members before, but it bears repeating. I remember you asking me a question. I was talking about, you know, um, this forgiveness meditation, Hermetic forgiveness meditation. And I was like, oh, yeah. And so I had done it the first time. And do you remember? I don't, it's too far back. I'm not going to put you on the spot of what you asked me, but you said, um, who was there with you? And I was like, what? You know, I was there. You mean, do you mean who came up for me? And no, no, no. That's not what I'm talking about. You know, I don't need to know that. It's like, who was there with you? And it's this idea that we don't often think about, that like we have to do everything alone. And it's like, and then, you know, you gave me the idea of like, okay, you know, your wife on one side, your kids on another side, you know, your parents, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, all of your relations all the way back, you know, they form, you're the point of the spear, but they're all backing you. They're all connected energetically with you so that when you forgive this person, whether they did something or didn't do something or was just perceived, you know, and then on and on through the meditation, you have all of this backup. It's not just your energy, it's not just you, but we often forget about that. And it was so it was definitely a turning point for me in a lot of these things that we do, where it's like I rarely, you know, I mean, we all walk the path alone, but at the same time, we have all of these acquaintances and help with us if we just ask and we just, you know, put the tap on them or whatever. So, and I just found that to be, you know, that was one of those real pristine moments, you know, that really changed a lot in the way that I think about this. And that was, God, it must be 20 years ago now. So,
I remember that. And that's like there's two of the practices we've joked about. One that one and the other one is pulled straight out of the Corpus Hermeticum. And it says, imagine you're capable of all these things. And I encourage people to go read that. And it says, but if you shut yourself up and say, I am small, I can do nothing, I know nothing, what have you to know with God?
right.
Well, I would often take people through that meditation and I'd say, okay, now you're visualizing this and you're visualizing that, just as it says right there in the paragraphs. Who was with you? And always, people always visualize themselves alone. There's no one else in this world they populate. Everyone, everyone consistently. There's no other people in this world, and that's the problem. So when you do that practice, like we talked about, the one you just mentioned, and that's in Wisdom's Bliss,
Right.
and that is similar to the foundational practice in Vajrayana, the Vajrasattva practice. And the point there is you're realizing your interdependent connection to things. See, that's the other problem. We're all one. No, we're not. You know, I stub my toe, you don't bleed. I get a bill, you don't pay it. So but we are interconnected. Things ripple around and through. So we stop and we look at the reality of that interconnectedness, so that when I say, I need power, I need some juice. Oh, where does my power leak out? Turn the phone off, turn the screen off, stop the distractions. You know, I've said it twice so far, I'll say it again. You know, you say no to the Big Mac, And it's really amazing because people underestimate the power of the small thing. There is a tremendous amount of self-sabotage that goes into perfectionism or all or nothingism. And when we're doing anything, it's not perfect right out of the box. We have to develop it. We have to develop the patience and the skill. And we do that one terribly slow and painful stick Buddha drawing at a time. And then we get better and better and better. And suddenly it kind of looks like something okay, and then better, and it looks like something reasonable. And suddenly, maybe I can put something in the local art show and it doesn't look like I did it with crayon. Now, I'm very happy with my crayon work, Dustin. I think that my crayon is exceptional, by the way, and I just want to share that with everyone.
I imagine that it is.
Well, of course, it's ever slightly so superior. Not too much because I want to be humble here, but but it is better than most crayon work.
Well said.
But this is where we sabotage ourselves because when you say no to something just for that hour, then you can do it for another hour, and then you can do it for a day. And if you did it for a day, that day is gone. The conceptualization of, oh, 3 days is just a concept. It's not real. I mean, there's some physiology to it, but after a while that wears off. Then there's just right now. Same thing when you're distracted in meditation. Yeah, laugh about it. Bring your mind back. Start, boom. Oh, so you celebrate your successes without overblowing them,
Right.
but you don't ignore them either and say they don't mean anything because, you know, look, my painting is crap. I didn't win an award. It's like saying I'm not an Olympic athlete because I didn't do that all or nothing, that perfectionism is a terrible, terrible. And I think I'm going to tell you right now, it's probably one of the single most destructive psychological expressions that I see today. Enjoy what you're doing, accept the good in what you're doing, be honest about it depending on what it's about, be honest about where you need to improve. I mean, if you want to, you may not want to or need to, how that's going to happen, and then be glad that you're making progress each step of the way every day and be joyful about that. And then the powers open up to you. But the other thing is that falls into self-concept or virtue, human virtue. And in the traditional initiatic systems, each of the spheres of the tree of life is associated with a virtue as a vice as well. So if you develop the virtue of the sphere, you develop its qualities and the power is automatically open to you. Most people ignore the virtues and the vices. They think of them as some kind of peculiar holdover from the past, but they're actually the inner key to unlocking it. For
And
example, the virtue of Malkuth, the physical world, is discrimination. This or that, cause and effect. It's understanding relationships, right? So the virtue of Yesod is often, or the sphere is often, kind of a mental stability, learning how to be stable because flightiness, well, it's a kind of idleness is one of the things given to it, but it's like an inertness. Nothing's happening. It's just inert. So you have to learn to stabilize the mind so it doesn't fly all over the place.
can you go through the others?
Well, I'll go through the ones that are most important to us.
Okay.
Okay. So with Hood, it's truthfulness. And this is the one I tell you. Okay, don't lie. I'm not even going to tell you to be truthful. I'm just going to tell you not to lie today. And notice how often across the day you lie. And then, of course, Netzach is love, but also lust. And what is lust? Lust is a kind of possessive desire. I want what I want because I want it. It's not just sexual or physical. It's anything whereas I want that I want that I want. Whereas love is a relationship. It's a dynamic. It's expressive. And of course, there's 4 different types of love, at least in Greek, you know. And then pride, uh, selflessness. I don't like that word, but um, selflessness and pride are the virtue and vices of Tiferet. And pride is excessive self-focus or self-importance. You have to learn to self to get out of your own way. So the point about that is, again, when we talk about the inner awakening, we're talking about the awakening of the heart. We're talking about that inner awakening of Tiferet. That's why I'm telling you so often how to get out of your own way so that you can let some of that juice flow through. And then we deal with um, Gebra, which is anger or violence. And I think anger is the proper word, whereas its proper virtue is courage. We have a lot of people who just aren't courageous. They're not going to take any risk. And risk can be in a variety of ways. Risk is meaning when you ask someone for help and they just don't want to do it because they don't want to be bothered. That's a form of cowardice. Or they do the minimum that's required. Bare minimum. With chesed, it would be, they say mercy or compassion, generosity, but it's with an intelligence. It's not stupid. It's not idiot compassion. And because of its vastness, its size, its vice is gluttony. And that's what the secret is about. The secret is a form of gluttony. The universe is a catalog. I get what I want. That's gluttony. I just eat whatever I can get. And there's no discrimination, all consuming, all expansive consumption, rather than a sense of what skills do I have? What resources do I have? What can I do with this that's beneficial to myself and beneficial to others? Or more importantly, at this point, I really have everything I need. I don't care that much about myself. What can I do that's beneficial to others? And beneficial means on 2 realms. One is the relative realm of duality, and then there's the absolute or time and eternity. How can I help people undertake this path? So just as we say it's foolish to talk to people about spirituality when they're hungry, as we see Jesus fed them before he gave them the sermon, but at the same time, it's foolish to ignore spirituality and just make it about consumption. And then we have Saturn, and Saturn is virtuous silence, how to be quiet about things. And that's the secret to power. Too many people talk about their experiences, they talk about their plans, they talk about their stuff. The psychic energy that exists in the throat is just wasted. It's just a spent force. So learn silence, you know. And those would be the things to focus on. If you want, I mean, those are real practical devices, but those are the virtues, the classical virtues that awaken the inner energies or powers within.
And they could use those keywords or concepts like that with that exercise that you went over a few minutes ago with the sphere above their bed before waking or after waking, and then again at the end of the night. It just
It's
makes
perfect
sense
for
that
it.
it would be that. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're going to ask that inner being or that deity to help you bring more of this into your life. And you can stay with each one for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Don't rotate out quickly. Don't do this thing of the week. Try to stay with something for 3 weeks
Right.
before you rotate out.
Makes sense. What else, Dustin? I could see the smoke coming out the ears and the cranks turning. So
Um, well, I think, um, I think you shed a lot of light on this idea of power and its relationship to like self-trust and devotional practice and stuff. And I think the self-trust piece comes into play when, like, as you were stating in regard to like some type of devotional practice that you do throughout the day, um, you're essentially like kind of getting out of your own way, right? So um, it's almost like the paradox that you will come to rely on or trust yourself more by, like, you know through getting out of your own way, or through a devotional practice where you like maybe expand your sense of self or awaken the virtuous aspects of these different powers, right, as you described on the tree. um and it's a process of like growth, not something that happens overnight, right? um but yeah, I guess, I don't know, maybe I'll have to think about it a little bit, and just in terms of like whether I think here's and maybe this is a reasonable articulation of the 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 intellectual problem that still like exists for me mentally in regard to the relationship between power and like devotional work and all the themes that we've been exploring, um is just that, like, from an intellectual standpoint, I can't make the like logical progression, or the make the logical like link between like a devotional practice and developing power as different virtues, and the idea of having more power in my life, or manifesting more of the things that I prefer in my life through, like, let's say, the power of the mind, or my, what comes to me through the mind and my ability to act on it. And maybe that's just because there's, and maybe you can explain that. My hypothesis is that, like, there's not necessarily like a logical bridge between those things, but more something that like comes out through experience. Like, you have to like do the practice to then see the result. Or, but maybe there, I don't know, maybe there is, or maybe my question isn't clearly articulated enough.
Let's try this. We'll use those aspects of the tree that we talked about earlier. I exist. I have all these capacities within me, known and unknown. I'm going to dedicate myself to awakening and realizing them. We'll call that the great work of the spiritual path. But you have to say that you exist. You have to recognize your existence. Otherwise, there's nothing to work with. And what is the purpose here? To understand both known and unknown capacities. And what else is there? I mean, that's pretty much it. So I exist, and I'm going to understand my known and unknown capacities. Bring them to fruition, the fullness of my being, of my ability. I recognize that where I am at in this world, we'll say Malkuth, is inadequate to that task. Therefore, I must go somewhere else where I can do this more fully or completely. Or I recognize that that is not within my grasp at the moment. I will utilize every opportunity around me on a day-to-day basis to bring it to fruition. That's discrimination. You've analyzed and you've come to a conclusion. That conclusion rests within the mind, Yesod. Yesod now is told on this aspect of my being, I will not rest. I have a goal here. The goal to bring to realization is that realization of my capacity, either by acquiring means and methods to go elsewhere, get education or experience, or to utilize every opportunity before me on this day. And really, they're the same thing because you're using every opportunity that you have today to get you the resources to get out and get the skills, experiences you want. You see, so it's not really one or the other. They work together. I am honest with myself. I will not lie about my weaknesses or my strengths. And I find my weaknesses and I eradicate them one by one. I do not let them get in my way. Hence the blasted tower card, because it's really easy to think about stuff, but putting it into action is other. That's something else. Then there's the devotion of love. My love or relationship to this ideal, to this self-conceptualization, to this goal, this self-expression is overwhelming, to the sacrifice of all else, hence the card of death leading from those paths. At the same time, it helps you come to understand why you have the relationships you do to other people around you and how they do help you achieve your goals and how you're not just standing alone. And even those things which we think of as enemies or opponents can be beneficial because without an opponent in the boxing ring, there's no ring. There's no victory. Without a critic who's never held a brush before commenting on your paintings, there's no real sense of understanding of how strong or weak you are in the presence of unwarranted and unfounded commentary. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
How dare you pick that example out of my brain, Mark Stavish?
Because it's so simple. You know, I was watching that docudrama, that documentary on Billy Joel. It was wonderful if you haven't watched it. And I'm thinking this guy, you know, his great downfall was that he was too concerned about what other people thought, these stupid critics, and I do mean stupid. You know, he was a brilliant composer, a brilliant writer. There was a technical skill to him that I simply didn't understand till it was explained to me. Someone they explained how technically proficient this was, but his ego in the negative sense, in the bad sense, I need the approval of them. No, you don't. Your approval is Christy Brinkley's your wife, and you just sold a gazillion albums. That's your approval. You know, but that goes into maybe one of the problems that human beings have. Why do we find ourselves always dissatisfied? But that's for another story. Here we're going to overcome that dissatisfaction. Now we've made progress in our path. We feel strong about who we are, but we're not completely there yet. But there's the sense of pride or accomplishment in a good way, and there's pride and accomplishment in a negative way where we hold ourselves over others. We think we're better than them.
Nice.
And then, of course, we move into the power of, do we get angry about things, or do we stay focused on our goal and in that process have the courage to move forward and overcome the obstacles? And with that, is that vision, that goal we have for ourselves and others, is it big enough and encompassing enough to be beneficial both on a mundane level, we'll call time, and on eternity? Does it help us both in the here and the hereafter? And do we have the capacity to be silent, to allow it to grow and nurture rather than just keep, aborting it halfway through because we can't focus our energy enough on it?
I see. So I think one of the things that you're trying to articulate is that when we enter into a spiritual path, particularly like within the context of Western esotericism, right? Because that's like in some ways, our focus, right? Uh, People may be drawn to the path because they want the power to rearrange their life um, in a with a secret superpower or a shortcut mentality or whatever, right? Like, and uh, and that may be part of it, right? It may not be all of it, right? Um, but that uh, in let's say like even if we pursue uh, power as an aspect of what we're trying to develop, the ability to um, like have greater influence, let's say it's starting with the sphere of our own life, right? um, the reality is that the 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 path isn't just about the power or the influence that you cultivate. It's about you evolving into the being that can use whatever power or influence you have with like wisdom and these other virtues. um, and so the one of the reasons why it's so like painful or challenging, and brings up so much crap, for lack of a better word, is because those are the things that we need to deal with or overcome to evolve in that way. So so you're not saying it's not about acquiring power, but you're saying like it's about a, you know, evolution, like evolving into a, you know, a greater version of yourself that's beyond your present capacity to fully conceive of or understand. um, because it's not just about you here right now in this life being like happy and satisfied. It's about like who you're becoming or what you're evolving into or what comes next, and also about other people, right? Or the evolution of not just me as an individual, but the evolution of like human beings.
Well, that's a good synopsis. And I think, many people know that I knew Joe Olszewski for a very, very long time, and of course wrote, that memoir of him, The Magical World of Dr. Joseph Olszewski. And yeah, it should be required reading. Um, as should be the book, The Trickster and the Paranormal by Hansen. And the reason we say The Trickster and the Paranormal is because he was deeply involved in psychic research in the 80s at the known research facilities. And he wrote what happened to people who actively engage in efforts to engage the paranormal forces on a regular basis. And of course, the qualifier there is they were actively seeking to engage with paranormal forces outside of tradition. And Brian and I have spent a great deal of time discussing the problems of that. The potential is little, it's limited. The problem's vast. The risk to return ratio is not worth it. But try to tell that to folks. So, Trickster and the Paranormal by George Hansen is a really very good book and should be read by everyone. Now, Joe tried to do things within tradition, but he wanted to do things really pretty much for himself. Uh, and that book is kind of a cautionary tale of when you really want something really big. His aspirations were fundamentally outrageous. They're just there was no reason. There was no reasonable rationale for the efforts or the desires, other than I want what I want. Yeah, and it was about money. And the amount was staggering. Now, the reason I say this is because, the universe, the angel or whatever was appealing to it for the ritual that went south. Again, it kind of has an equilibrium that it's going to maintain. Now, if I give this to you, what does that do to the equilibrium? If you get what you want, okay, you want a new car because you need one to keep your job. That doesn't really affect the equilibrium in a negative way. You want a new car so you can get a job. That doesn't really affect the equilibrium in a negative way. That helps you. You're a better person. You can help the people around you. You're not a burden on anyone. That's plus, right? You're sick. You want health. That helps the equilibrium because if you're healthy, then you can have the potential to do things that you can grow and expand with, even if they're very incremental. Okay. You want to be, I don't know, ruler of the free world. Okay, you and maybe 20 other people. In theory, only one person gets to hold the job at any one time. There's a lot of karma, action, cause and effect that's going to be coming into play to make that happen and see who gets that job. Stuff that probably the people who end up getting the job don't even know what's really going on. They're probably oblivious to the, the invisible plays on so many levels, both material and immaterial, that are happening. So when we approach these invisible beings, we have to understand, depending on who they are, what they are, a certain degree of equilibrium is going to be maintained. We don't even know what that means, by the way. We just have to understand that's the basis. The gods won't do for us what we're not willing to do for ourselves. And if you find a God that is willing to do for you what you're not willing to do for yourself, you better read the fine print. This goes back to where our sense of desires can be, it's like Faust. It's his undoing. A relentless, all-consuming desire that's just focused on me, what I want. And that's, it's best that you don't get it at that point. Things just get worse. How do we get what we want? Limit our desires to things that we know are in the beginning manageable and achievable. Remember, we talked about that. And then move on from there. I want to make a painting that's good. I want to make a painting that I can enter in a contest. I don't need to have to win. I just want to be able to pass to get entered, pass the jury selection. See, step by step. I want to get a role in a play. I want to start a small mail order business that makes X amount of money a month. Have a goal, reasonable goal. Okay? For something you do with goals and you work up. And then the magic you do or the ritual work or the meditation adds juice to that to help that grow and expand because you've given it a channel and the channels are manageable. Whereas if you don't have a channel, the juice has to find a channel to work through, and that can often be incredibly explosive, as people will know. We have a joke about it. Don't do a money ritual in the fall unless you plan to have your car at the garage for a new hood from that deer that just ran into it.
Why? Explain.
Oh, Brian, you take that one.
I would, I've heard this version a number of times, and it's the same kind of thing. Like, in some ways, it's like, what do you think you're going to get if you ask God for more patience? Tons of crap to let you practice being patient. So it's the same kind of thing, it's like, if you do a ritual in the fall when things are tanking, going down into they're in the decrease, the decline, but you're trying to like go against that and you're asking for more or whatever, so that you can buy a new car or get a new car. It's like you might get that, but at the same time, you're going to end up, there's going to be some balance where, in this case, the deer that runs into your car and totals your car. So you have to get the new car, and any money that you've got is probably just a down payment on that car, not even enough to carry it over. So now you're even in a worse scenario than you are when you started. It ends up being, like, okay, my payment before, it was an old car, but I didn't have to, it was paid off. Well, now you have a new car, but you got a $400 a month payment that you have to deal with. So I mean, I think all these things, they can get a little, we can overthink them again, but at the same time, when you first start this work, I mean, we start with basic understandings of like flow and rhythm, right? Like there's a flow to the day, there's a rhythm to the week, there's a rhythm to the month, there's a rhythm to the year, and multiple years on different scales, right? Depending on what you're looking at. And so the idea is that you're on the most basic level of trying to align yourself with whatever the flow is at that time. Why are you constantly fighting against the stream? Why not swim with the current, not against it, right? Even in a riptide, you don't swim against it no matter how strong a swimmer you are. You go sideways. That's the best you can do. It's just to get out of that pull. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked out into the ocean, and who knows what'll happen from then, right? So we part of that, again, that observation of mind and knowing ourselves and doing whatever techniques we're doing to make ourselves more sensitive is being more sensitive to the flow of energy on all of those levels. I mean, nobody can just stay awake for days on end and think they're going to be, at the same mental level that they are in the beginning, right? You have to rest. You have to slow down. There's night and day, right? So part of that sensitivity is just understanding it on that basic level and trying to match what you're doing, all of your approaches to that flow. And that will just naturally increase what you're doing as opposed to fighting against it constantly. So, because maybe you are strong enough to push against that. But what happens is it's just like a dam, right? Like you're just damming that stuff up. You're not going to stop it for any length of time. And then when that whiplash comes, it's gonna, it knocks out the whole town rather than just, the part that you're trying to dam up for your fields or whatever, right? The water backs up. You can't stop that flow. It's too powerful.
Yeah, that's an important point. And the point I wanted to make was that it helps us to conceptualize well what our goal is, rather than just saying, I want $10,000 because, what for? Well, I need it for this. Well, that may be true. It probably is. There's some things we can only pay with money, some bills. Okay. But we have to try and think of what is the long-term solution to our problem, whether it be an employment issue or whether it be, well, I want a new car. And then you focus on getting a new vehicle, but you have to be open enough to maybe get a vehicle that normally you otherwise wouldn't want. But you see, that's where the self-concept or the subjective synthesis comes in. All the little filters that pop up in our mind of doubt or, like that's why you see in some of the rituals why it's outlined in extreme detail, legalistically, what things spirits can and cannot do. You have like a contract, really. It's like a legal contract. And some people will do that with their visualizations. So, and a car is a good one. Okay, so instead of just conceptualizing the idea of a vehicle that they're happy with, they don't trust that. It has to be I don't know, brick orange Subaru. They get so detail oriented that they close off other possibilities. You have to be precise enough to know what it is and recognize it when you get it, but loose enough to be able to be open to what happens. It's the same way, like again, when you're either playing the instrument or holding the paintbrush, if it's too loose or too tight, you can't get the desired result. So we have to learn to do the same thing with our goals and aspirations. We have enough focus where we know where we're going and to guide us, but not so much that we ignore the opportunity that will come up to fulfill that very goal or objective. You have to be able to know it when you get it. You have to be able to recognize when you get it. And more often I'll see people, they'll just have a money goal in mind and thinking that that's sufficient. And then of course the joke is, yeah, well, I got the check for 5,000 and I ended up paying to repair my car with it. We're not saying that's going to happen all the time, but it's an indicator that there's a lot of other unconscious work or preliminary work that needed to be done. And that just wasn't done. Clearing out your own mess. and trusting the process too. Trusting the process that you're going to get this money or this car or this job or this relationship in a manner that's healthy and beneficial for you and anyone else involved. Did you even think about that part? And that's what I find. A lot of people, they assume that, but they don't think about it. And there's a big difference between assuming it and having really spent some time dealing with the nature of relationships and my goals.
It'd be like when Brian talks about context, when he's talking about sacred space, and I feel like that's something that, yeah, we don't usually think about that much. All right, well, I don't want to keep you too long today, Mark. And I do feel like I could probably keep hashing this out with you over many conversations. So maybe we'll get the pleasure of having you back on again at some point. But I would like for you to have the opportunity to tell people how they can get in touch with you or work with you. If you'd like to add that to the end of our conversation here.
No, it's real simple. Google is your friend. Just look me up. You'll see quite a few websites come up. There's the Institute for Hermetic Studies, and we're having a new website we're going to launch probably within the next month. So the old one is there, but it's not it's not been updated or reliable, but it does have contact data on it. The new one is just, God, spectacular. It's beautiful compared to uh, everything else we've seen out there. And it's going to have all of our coursework on it, all of our blogs, everything in one place. And it's just great. Which means we have our Teachable course, which will probably still be available for at least a year as we transition people off of that to the new website. So Teachable, you can find the Institute for Hermetic Studies at Teachable for our coursework. And you can sign up there for our free course, Unfolding the Rose, which is, of course, the recording that we used from when I was up there in New York.
Right.
Yeah, that's the basis of it. And it's free, and you can listen to that and get the ancillary material that goes with it. And we have our blog, Vox Hermes. If you Google that, that'll show up as well. That, of course, will be linked on the new website very nicely. And there's a lot of articles and essays there. And of course, a YouTube search will yield dozens of podcasts and interviews, and
Right.
some that we've done, such as our Conversations from the Edge series, which is interviews with different practitioners, not always well-known practitioners. Some of them are, some of them aren't, on different topics of Western esotericism. So we're easy to find.
Yeah. Great.
Cool. Well, thank you. I really appreciate you coming on and talking to us about these things. This is kind of like complex ideas, and it's at the heart of a lot of the things that, you know, we're doing in our program and that we talk about and that we're just trying to figure out. And also because I see our job as articulating, you know, the truth as clearly as possible based on our experience. And you know, that's, I feel like that's not, I don't know, it's not always easy. And I just really appreciate the perspective that you bring to it, because it's you know, it's different and it's fresh, and you know, it definitely carries the weight of experience with it. So thank you very much, really appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think the members will get a lot out of this. They're very excited. We've already kind of preempted them, and they were like, "This is going to be great. When are you going to publish it?"
Ah, good, good.
First comment was like, wow, Mark Stavish.
Yeah,
Cool.
now wait till they listen, right?
Well,
Yeah.
you know, they don't know you're a real human, you know. It's
Yeah.
like that's the thing. We all kind of carry that sometimes.
Oh,
No.
well, you see, I'm not really sitting here. I'm levitating.
That's right.
What you can't see is that
That's
deities
right.
are holding me up.
What you can't see is those spectacular hiking shorts that I got at Walmart that are just perfect for this weather. Yeah. Oh,
Perfect. All right,
well,
sir.
good. Thank you very much. Let me know if you need anything else. I think that went well, and uh, it's a good topic. I mean, it's a
Well, it's so, it's actually, it doesn't get touched on enough, I feel like. Like people, like you said, people sort of have an aversion to it now. And it can be such a valuable asset to your practice. I, I don't know. I mean, I've always gotten a lot out of it. So, I just think it's something that's, underutilized in whole.
think of it this way, Dustin, that you have the power. You don't use see the word doesn't have weight for you because it's used too much. You think power is something else, or others people using it may think power is something else. It's kind of like um, it becomes jingoistic or euphemistic. It loses
Yeah.
meaning. You have the power to create lifelike paintings. Okay. Powerful representations of people, places, and things. And what will happen is someone will say to you, as if it's a gift. And you have to say, yes, it is the gift that I gave myself through thousands of hours of torturous practice.
Torturous is a accurate description.
Mhm.
Because it was sparked or fueled by an initial innate ability and enthusiasm, but that only gets you so far, right?
Innate ability, only, it's I keep telling my one son, I said, innate ability is only going to get you so far. Discipline is going to carry the day.
Yeah.
It's true.
So when you have to take that opportunity to really be honest with people about that, so that they say, and said, and you, maybe you can paint this good, maybe you could paint better, maybe not as good, but you can paint as well if you choose to. You just have to want to and do it. And that's the power. The power comes from action, not inaction. It's what
And
you choose to do.
and that's where I feel like I think that's a really good point that you made, because that touches on what you said in the introduction to the inner way that I read, where you were saying that like people want to get the things that they want, but in a way that is against nature, let's say, right?
Hmm.
Or that they're looking for like some kind of secret power, right? And that's exactly it. It's like I'm using, and you're absolutely right.
A
There's
cheat code.
right. That's right. That's
Hmm.
exactly
Yeah.
it. It's like we do in spiritual context, we do use the word power as an equivalent for some type of cheat code or secret or whatever. I'm going to do this thing, use this special word, special technique, special meditation, and even though it's antithetical to the process of nature, I'm going to get what I want because I got the secret codes or whatever. um and that does really hinder our perception of the idea of power, and like and our self perception of how much of it that we have or can develop, right? It's really destructive, actually.
Well,
It's
and
a
you
trap.
now you have the opportunity for what all three of us do is look at artificial intelligence and you say, no, that's not empowering. I'll say, no, it's not. I mean, to some degree it is. It's okay on some things. But generally speaking, I'll say it's not because this guy, he's trying to say, oh, I'll do some images for you. And what are they? He's doing like these AI generated images. I mean, thanks, but I didn't ask for them. I don't need them and I don't want them. And I could do my own if I wanted some AI generated image for something. But it's not the same as a real painting, no matter how different that painting may be in style and expression. I watched that show. I mentioned it to you, the that British show where they do the annual paint off,
Oh yeah.
you know. What amazes me about it is there's a lot of styles I would never been exposed to. I would never have thought about. And some of them, quite frankly, aren't that good. I don't understand. They're picked for political reasons, I think, rather than stylistic. And there's some like one girl, she did this stuff with watercolor markers that was just off the charts incredible. Just amazing. Now, I knew it wasn't going to win, but it was really an amazing painting. And then some of these folks are doing things with oils like, how can you even do that with oil in this short of a period of time? Or like it was just when they're done. And the judges would come back like on some of the paintings and say, we're halfway through. We have no idea what this painting is going to look like because it doesn't even look like it started. They come back 30 and it's like boof. It's like Venus fully grown out of it. And it's like, they're all phenomenal expressions and skill. Same thing with music, it's not the same, or writing. Having AI write your paper for you doesn't mean you know anything. You're not a composer if you put it into AI and AI generates it. You're a pretender. And it's okay, but it's not the same. And I think for us, what we're facing is that reality of that Ahrimanic deception of Steiner's Ahriman, that Ahrimanic deception of this is power. No, that's technology. Power is, like you said, the guy who made it, the guy who can upgrade it. We're just users. There's a difference.
Mm.
Well, Andrew just came back. I gotta go. I'll see you guys later, okay?
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
I know that for me, it's really easy to be inspired by conversations like these, but then fall back into my normal patterns. It's easy to forget about these ideas and the practices that turn them into real, impactful experiences. That's why I created the To Be Silent membership, because I wanted to have a place and a resource that would keep me in the zone. And not only creating, but being a part of the To Be Silent membership has helped me to do that. As a member, you'll get access to more than just our courses and guided meditations. It's a warm, supportive community geared toward more personalized guidance. The heart of our program is our live Q&A calls with Brian and myself. These calls are held multiple times a month. They differ from the podcast in that we get to dive much deeper into the practices, how they work, how they affect our lives, and offer tailored feedback to members' questions. This is your opportunity to interact with us, to interact with each other, to share your experiences, and to get your questions answered. It's our way of shedding some light on the path and offer a space for you to connect with other like-minded individuals. If this resonates with you, we'd love to see you on the inside. Visit tobesilent.com to join or schedule your free one-on-one discovery call with me today. And now, on with the show. Well.
I think that went pretty well. If you do you?
Yeah,
Yeah, I think they're gonna frickin' freak out,
it
to
blew
be
my
honest with
mind.
you. Look, man, the dude knows how to articulate very abstract concepts in a very good way,
Yeah, definitely.
you
Yeah,
know?
I almost feel like I have to like digest it to
Oh,
like
yeah.
be able to have another meaningful conversation about it.
Oh, definitely.
Like I'm
There's
like,
no doubt.
I'm gonna have to listen to that and think about it for a while to like get it.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
no, but that's what we want them to
but it
think,
was like
right?
very healthy and refreshing because like, it's like yeah, it just felt, yeah, I feel like healthy and refreshing is the right term because it's like it's not what it's almost, I feel like you always know when you're dealing with somebody or something that is like I don't know, above you, or not, it's not the right word, but it's like they're
Well, a
they're
master of his craft.
yeah, their understanding surpasses yours, because it's like you ask a question within the context of your understanding, but they're giving you the answer in the context of their understanding, which is a more expansive view of what it is that you're asking about. And I feel like those kinds of conversations, you got to be like, okay, like I need a minute. Thank you.
That's right. We're not in Kansas anymore.
Yeah. Which is something that I feel like that's how I feel like when I'm working with the allies, you know?
Yep.
Yeah. And there's been, I've had a lot of that lately with my smaller
Yeah.
sessions with them, is like, it's like, okay, what do you think I need to, work on here next? What do you think is it, and then it's like, all right, what about this? And it's like, what it just takes me a while to like work through it and
Right.
get that like healthier perspective and a deeper understanding of like what I need right now, which is
Well,
not
it's kind of,
necessarily what I would have thought I needed going into it.
didn't you? I kept coming back to the thing with like, the juxtaposition between our conversations, his explanation of things, and believe it or not, like Peterson's explanation of things,
Mm.
like his in the early work, when he was really basic, and he'd say, when you sit on the edge of your bed and ask yourself, what can I do that I will do?
Right, that
It's
I'm
like
willing
not
to
just
do.
what can I do to make my life better? It's like what can you do that you will do?
Right.
So we're going
Yeah.
to start with the really tiny increments here, not like, oh, what would I do if I had $1 million? Like, no, 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 no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like, what could I do if, that I would do? What would be the next best step or whatever? It's like, yeah,
yeah. I like what he said about the virtue of Saturn being silence, because it made me think of to be silent. And I always
yeah,
thought of to be silent as like the earth
Earth
and earth axiom, but I feel like that gave it like a different context.
flavor.
Yeah, I was like, oh,
It's sort of like the
that's
difference
cool.
between like Mars and Pluto.
Yeah, right, right. Higher
A
octave.
higher octave, a higher harmonic of
Yeah,
to be silent. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I like that too. Is immediately where my mind went as well. I was
yeah,
like, oh, that's good. I like
yeah.
it. I'm taking
Yeah.
it. I will possess you.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Oh God.
What were
Well,
you gonna
that's
say?
cool, man. I think it was good.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah. I really I think people are really gonna enjoy that, to
We're
be
gonna have
honest.
to have like a, I don't know, a quarterly Stavish episode or something.
Yeah, something.
If he's willing to do it,
Yeah, I mean, like, you take a concept like that and then you just literally shred it, right? And just
Yeah.
I mean, that was 2 hours of
Yeah.
pretty good amounts. I mean, the questions were good, the answers were good. It's like um, no discrepancies with what we have been telling people. It's like, so just like you said, like a higher harmonic of what we've been telling them, basically. So they
I
get a
actually
little bit more
honestly,
of a context, to a broader context.
the only program that we haven't, I mean, the contact course, we never really finished it. We never even taught like devotional work. And
Hmm.
I feel like that conversation was a great like bridge from what we've done so far to like
Going into that. And,
going into that. So,
yep.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, I mean, you can see how that simple exercise, beginning of the day and end of the day, I mean, that's like, devotional imbibing,
Right.
right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Like, I
totally.
give
Yeah.
this to you today, everything, every conversation, every interaction, whether I fail or succeed in it, whatever it is, I'm, I'm offering that up. Whatever energy is generated from that, I'm offering it up to you, you know? And it's like, that's a pretty, that's pretty good, you know?
Very good.
Yeah. It's a great place to start and maybe even finish, I mean, like literally, like, the other ones are, a little more pointed, like Hermes or whatever, or if you wanted to use that template to do something else. But basically, I mean, that's a great way to introduce somebody to basic devotionals, right?
Yeah, and I also thought that like I I wish I wish I thought to ask him about this, but I thought his what he was saying about like being attracted to somebody and like, as a young person, and I felt like what one of the things he was implying through that like analogy was that you use your like it, because part of the question is always like, who should I do my devotional practice to or with, and why, and does that even exist? Is that even a real thing? Why should I
Right.
like who, some people say Mary, some people say Hermes, some people say Shiva, some people say,
Sure.
it's like, fucking, how the hell am I supposed to decide like what's going to be
There's
best for
hundreds of
me?
them.
There's like a gazette, like, what the fuck, this is overwhelmingly ridiculous. Like, it's not just like, we're not just raised Catholic and then have a patron
Right.
saint and whatever. It's like you literally have to figure it out. And so I feel like one of the things that maybe he was trying to say is like, you can, one of the ways to approach it is by like feeling it out. Like, do you have a, like, it's not like I decided intellectually to be attracted to Kira. It
Right,
was
right,
like,
right.
you know what I mean? It was like, oh, yeah, okay.
There's
Like,
something invisible, unspoken, and yet is so overwhelmingly powerful you can't deny it.
right. And to be able to like trust that in its simplest form, but then also have a framework within which to like explore it or cultivate that relationship was really what I think he fleshed out really well. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah, it's
Exactly.
a way to dip your toes in the water without doing like a 42-day involved devotional practice.
Right.
It's like,
Right. Exactly.
not that that's a bad thing. It's just like, how do you
No, no,
start
no.
to like try it out and see how it works for you?
Right. And like you said, I mean, don't jump too quickly. It's like see if there's see what response you'll get and see if it's, you know, I mean, because it could be two things. Either you're not sensitive enough to get it, which, it's no fault, basically, or, or there isn't a true connection there. And so, you would have to develop it in some other way or use some other aspect, maybe rendered down even a bit, right? Like instead of going directly to Venus, it might be like maybe one of the muses or something like that, right? It's like instead of going for the top dog, okay, well, maybe a couple steps down from that, like an aspect of the top dog, like a rendered down again, like that type of thing, where you know, you're doing like uh, uh, like assumption of the God form, but with one of the, with, Michael Angelo, like, or some avatar of artistic greatness or whatever it is, right? You start from even a lower, and that's where some of the, um, like some of the old texts will say like, um, and I think he's written it in a couple of his books, like, start with a saint because at least they had a human life, so it's like,
Yeah,
or
like,
something of that. And
yeah,
saint
yeah,
is a
yeah.
very broad term, right?
Right.
It's not just a Christian thing. It's like start with
Y-
like who were they inspired by? Who did they have contact with? There's that trail of, getting
Right.
to a higher and higher and higher position.
Right. And also like what he said about how that, like, because one of the things that like Bashar talks about when people ask about like having contact with a particular entity or something like that, whether it be a person that existed on Earth before, or a saint like you're describing, or an angel or something, right?
Hmm.
Is he always makes the point of like, you're creating your experience of that entity out of your own energy. Like it's not you, it's not just you that's doing it. You are tapping into or opening up to or experiencing like a bandwidth of energy or an archetypal frequency that exists, and that person, right, is functioning as like almost like a representation of that energy or a reflection of that energy to you, almost like a bridge. and and yet you're still creating out of your consciousness your experience of that. So like it always so I feel like in that way that whole idea, and how he said it is almost like, okay, let's say that there's like white light, and that's like the one, right? And then there's like all the different colors of the rainbow,
Prism, yeah.
right, with the tree of life, for instance, right? And then there's like there's probably like 1,000 different representations of orange that you could tap into. One of them is Hermes, right?
Right.
And it's like if that particular name or visage or lineage or whatever resonates with you, then that's an effective way for you to tap into that spectrum of energy. And that like the and to the with the understanding that like it's helping you to like I feel like perfect is the wrong word, but evolve that aspect of your nature, right? And
Right.
understand it and integrate it from like a different perspective or a higher perspective, and awaken
Gives
like
you
the
like a broader and more sensitive perceptual state of that. So you get more of the flavor and layering of it rather than just here's an orange popsicle. It's not the same as, you know, Grand Marnier, orange chicken, right? Where it's like these incredibly subtle layers of all of these orange, different aspects of orange flavors that just pop all together,
yeah,
right? It's like such a much more, um, uh, you know, over fulfilling experience, right?
right,
It's not just a single tone. It's a harmony of everything, right? Hence the assemblage point, right? It's like that's your access point to those perceptual states, or that in a way, you know, what if your perception, what if your assemblage point, if you could identify that with, as a link, just as analogy to like one of these aspects, right? It's like it gives you access to a whole spectrum, a band of perception, but through the lens of this aspect, and the way that you interact with it, it develops your experience of that, right? So, it's pretty unique, when you think about it like that.
yeah. I guess the thing that the main thing that it does for me is like it really helps to like reduce the fear of like choosing the wrong thing, or like you know what I mean, like
Yeah, no,
it's like
no, no,
there's not like
absolutely.
it's not like you're gonna damn your eternal soul by choosing to pray to the wrong god or something like that, like you know what I mean, like because
Oh,
it's a very like
man.
it's a very real thing to
It's
feel
a
that way,
very
like
real thing. That's
to
right.
feel that way, right? Or to
Well,
think,
I mean, if that ends up being my state at the end, I'm just gonna be like,
no,
look,
no, no, I don't
I
mean that.
asked you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I went to your house and literally out loud asked your ass, and you didn't say a goddamn word.
Yeah.
Not a flick in the ear, not a blink in the nose, not a lightning bolt, nothing. Not a
Yeah.
no. Don't do it, Brian.
Yeah.
Stay away from those Taoist bastards.
Right, right, right. Right, you're referring to the time that you went to where, I mean, like,
It was it
I'm gonna
was a
probably use
cathedral. I
this,
went to
so
a
yeah.
cathedral that was like during the off hours after the morning mass really early, but in between anything else going on. And when all the old ladies with rosaries left, I sat in there and said, "Okay, here I am. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm going to do, unless you tell me don't do it, because I don't want to damn my immortal soul if there's such a thing." Blah.
I guess on the flip side though, it's like when you Because on the like, because you could say, oh, I didn't get a response, or I didn't, nothing said don't do that. But then on the flip side, it's like, but then when you did like Taoist practices or Hermetic practices or whatever, or you worked with the Hermes or whatever,
Yeah.
do you feel like you got responses that,
Oh, for sure.
okay,
Yeah.
whether they were, and it doesn't necessarily mean something like from the sky came down and was like, hey, yeah, this is it, you're on the right path now, buddy. It was
Yeah.
more subtle than that, let's say.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Most of the time, it's like, I mean, I've had some, what I would think of as dramatic experiences with it, but, um, they're few and far between for sure, even for, what people would consider to be a very long time in the practice for me. But still, those dramatic responses are still few and far between. But I've never really, I'm not somebody who pushes for those either. I mean, I'm not looking for, I'm grateful and accepting of them when they come, but it's not like I'm constantly trying to do huge pieces of work with the intention of having some kind of blowout experience. Um, I do it because I like it. I do it because I feel it's beneficial for me, that I'm a better person for doing it, you know, and that it's helping me evolve into more than what I was in the past, hopefully,
Right,
you know.
right, which I feel like that's kind of the crux of what he was saying, is that like adjust your expectations.
Yeah. I mean, that's still pretty decent. I mean,
Not that that's a
I'm sure
bad
that I'm
thing.
sure that plenty of people don't do that, obviously.
No, but I'm just saying, like, I just feel like it's the counterpoint to the destructive mentality of the universe exists to just give you what you want when you ask for it.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it's a
So
healthier perspective.
I think on many levels healthier, you know,
Yeah,
right? Multiple levels of health there.
yeah,
For yourself as well, right? So it's
yeah,
like you're gaining and and um you're less disappointed, you know,
right. That's the main
and
thing,
which can wear you down over time, right? And
for sure.
and that's bleeding out energy, right? And that's one of the first things we talked about was like how do you plug up the holes, right? How do you're probably doing plenty of energy work and are acquiring a decent amount of energy, but you're bleeding it all out on a regular basis, because of all these other things that are unresolved in you.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
this is just two in and one out, right? It's like you're always in that one state, right? It's like
Right.
you're just
Yeah.
you're just basically keeping your nose above water. You're just existing in this path, and and the idea is that you want to move on that spectrum. So, it takes, I think that's why I put so much emphasis on the burning meditation is like, because that burns away stress, mental fatigue, and things come up that you remember that, look, again, I mean, um, you know, one of those other early on Peterson things that he would say is like, you're just going, you're doing your regular day or whatever, and then all of a sudden something you remember an embarrassing situation or something that didn't go well, that was like 15 years ago, and you haven't thought about it since then or whatever. It's like that shit is not resolved. That's why it's being brought up to you. It's not some random act. It's not some weird synapse firing, right? It's like it's literally like your subconscious is telling you what you need, what holes are there that you need to plug that are just sort of bleeding energy out that because if you're bleeding it out on the ground, you can't utilize it. It's like, gas you spill on the ground doesn't go in your car. It doesn't help the car go anywhere. You know, those things are the things that, like, anytime that happens, it's like I make a note. I, either use the phone or literally jot it down. I mean, I jotted things down on the paper when we were talking to him. It's like the things that come up to me that it's like, okay, I'm going to deal with that when we're done. I'm going to put it in my routine, get rid of that, like do some work with it, to help that process along. And again, from our own work is what we contribute to the members when we have them on, right? It's like, these are the things. If we stop doing our work, we have nothing to offer them.
Yeah.
I mean, at a certain point, that's just going to end, right? Because it's like we have nothing new to add. We have no new experiences. We don't have any information of how they might, move around a situation or go through it in a good way or whatever. It's like they end up surpassing us. And I really do hope on one level that they do surpass us in the best way. But we can't just not do the work, right? And just sort of like, oh, I'm just going to teach what I know, and that's the end of it. It's like you'll be stale in a very short period of time.
Right.
And you'll lose the desire to do it. It becomes a transactional thing.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that stuff is, it definitely, the conversation, I think, puts a different harmonic on all of those things that can help everyone, including us, a way to,
Definitely.
a way to recharge ourselves and think about it slightly differently and see what comes about if we put it into practice, if we take action with it, right?
Yeah.
So
That's the main thing.
that's the main thing.